happening tonight in Vancouver.
Masks are back.
So this is to address those situations where we are in an indoor setting with people who may not yet have been vaccinated.
Details of BC's back-to-school plan overshadowed with an unexpected mask mandate for everyone starting tomorrow.
In my opinion, it doesn't go far enough.
BC students will be headed back to school next month, and masks will be required for all students grades 4 and up, as well as teachers and staff. But some parents are still concerned that the province's back-to-school COVID safety plan still doesn't go far enough.
My highest risk really is going to be from my kids if they have to go back to school, particularly for the unvaccinated.
Students will be back in the classroom full-time in September, and remote learning will not be an option this year. With COVID cases rising in BC, parents say they're frustrated it's not being put back on the table.
This is City News Everywhere.
An unexpected bombshell affecting everyone in the province, not just school communities, overshadowing BC's COVID-19 back-to-school plan announced today.
We are reintroducing a mask requirement across British Columbia for all indoor public spaces.
This applies to everyone 12 and older, whether you're vaccinated or not, and comes with less than 24 hours notice.
In the broader community, as you know, we are seeing increased transmission and increasing levels of transmission, particularly among unvaccinated people, as we've talked about, and in part, of course, due to the increased transmissibility of the variant that we're seeing circulating right now, the Delta variant.
So starting Wednesday, mask up at retail and grocery stores, airports, restaurants, pubs, bars, and banquet halls, unless you're sitting down, on transit, in taxis, in offices that provide public services, in sports and fitness centers when not doing physical activity, most common areas, and inside schools for all K-12 staff, visitors, and students grade 4 to 12. Masks are one of the few COVID protocols remaining in schools this year, even with children 11 and younger not eligible for vaccine until late this fall at best.
The best way really for everyone to protect children who cannot yet be vaccinated is to get vaccinated.
But the most important thing we can do to protect them is to make sure that the adults around them are immunized.
Still, there's no vaccine mandate for teachers or school staff.
We have seen significant uptake of vaccines amongst school staff.
The teachers' union has it pegged at around 80%. Dr. Henry saying it reflects the community rates. And also, there may be more to come.
There are many things still on the table that we will be looking at as we go through this next few weeks and months.
For post-secondary, masks required in classes and common areas, vaccines needed to live in residence. And the new proof of vaccine will be shown at all non-essential places.
To go to a pub, to go to gym, including varsity students, to attend an indoor club meeting like joining a choir.
This surprise mask mandate, along with the proof of vaccine coming in September 13th, are to bolster the linchpin of protection, vaccines, on what could be a rocky road ahead.
As we're heading into a season where we know respiratory viruses, including COVID, spread more easily, is to increase immunization rates across the board.
For City News in Victoria, I'm News 1130's Lisa Yuzda.
Now, TransLink says it's gearing up to revert back to what transit riders were used to in the winter, which is a full mask mandate on buses, SkyTrain, and the C-Bus. But it will take some time to get their public information campaigns up and running again. TransLink says bus drivers will not be asked to enforce the new rules, but will be reminding people about the changes. And the Transit Police is now working on how it intends to begin reinforcing the mask mandate.
This means we expect all of our customers to wear masks while on board transit vehicles, but also inside stations and in sheltered stops or bus loops. It's my understanding that Transit Police are working with the province to sort of get some more details on that order, and they'll have more to share on that in the future.
TransLink is asking customers to be patient as the changes come into effect.
In my opinion, it doesn't go far enough, given that I have a child who's within the K-3 cohort.
BC students are headed back to the classroom next month with a mask mandate for most students and staff, but some parents still want to see more in the province's back-to-school COVID safety plan.
So I'm mostly concerned that in kindergarten to grade 3 cohort, children are left to choose, or their parents are left to choose, whether the child will mask in the classroom. I don't think that goes far enough.
Well, we do think the measures are insufficient. And so we were looking for a K-12 mask mandate. We were looking for a plan around vaccinating 12 to 17-year-olds.
No mask mandate for students in grades K-3 who are unvaccinated as BC families return to full-time in-person learning and extracurricular activities in schools. As for immunizations, the province says health authorities plan to target students and school staff in vaccination campaigns. Mike McCullough thinks that's a weak approach.
Strong suggestions are nice. Mandates are better, because if a teacher has an ideological reason not to get vaccinated, then a strong suggestion doesn't go very far with that person.
Proper ventilation in schools is another one of the main things parents have been fighting for ahead of the school year.
We have not received a full guideline how the air filters or air quality is being upgraded.
The province says $87.5 million in funding has gone towards HVAC system upgrades or replacements since the 2020 school year. They say this includes boiler and air handling system replacements, larger ductwork, and portable HEPA filtration units in classrooms.
We were certainly looking for more details around ventilation systems. We know work is being done, but we also know that teachers and families were in a situation last year where they actually had to order their own HEPA filters.
Education Minister Jennifer Whiteside maintains that schools can stay open safely, and the government says investigations by health authorities showed that schools were not significant sources of COVID-19 transmission. But parents say the Delta variant doesn't make them as confident.
I mean, we're coming into this school year in an entirely different position. We had, the Delta variant is more transmissible, it's more aggressive.
And instead of waiting to see, you take action now to get things right.
In Vancouver, Kier Junos, City News.
So we're going into the start of the school year with reasonable but not really high vaccination rates.
Back to school with the Delta variant, now the dominant COVID-19 strain in Alberta. Is there anything different for parents to be aware of?
It really feels like without that option to just keep them home that little bit longer while we wait for vaccination for the younger kids, it feels like all that work was wasted.
Lots of things are changing for kids when they head back to school in September. But one thing that the province still isn't bringing back for BC students is remote learning, something some Lower Mainland parents say is extremely frustrating.
My highest risk really is going to be from my kids if they have to go back to school, particularly for the unvaccinated younger child.
East Vancouver mother of 2, Taria Morel, was diagnosed with a heart and lung condition 9 years ago. That puts her at very high risk for severe outcomes if she gets COVID-19. Her daughter is fully vaccinated, so she feels comfortable with her returning to in-person learning. But right now, her 9-year-old son is too young to get the jab, which has her extremely worried. And with remote learning not being an option, she would actually have to pull him out of his school entirely if they want to do an online learning program.
So my son would lose his spot in his school, and it's like his community is super important for him. The schools are full, they're over-enrolled. If he loses that spot, I'm not confident he'd get back in. And it just feels extremely unfair that he should have to suffer that consequence because of my health status.
Maple Ridge parent of 2, Katie Clun, echoes Morel's concerns. She's worried about letting her kids go back to in-person learning when they are still not vaccinated. But Clun fears if she takes her kids out of their French immersion school to do at-home learning, their spots will be gone when they want to go back. She wishes remote learning could still be an option so her kids can stay connected with their teacher and classmates while being kept at home.
If my children want to stay home where it's as close to guaranteed safe as possible, we're going to have to pull them from their choice program, which is completely unfair. My grade 7, if I pull her, she won't be able to rejoin the French flow in order to graduate with her double dogwood. And she would also have to change high schools.
Morel would like to see remote learning as an option, even if it's just for a few months, until a vaccine for children under the age of 12 is approved.
Really, just a couple more months to get us through would just be such, so much, it would provide so much peace of mind for us. And really, I feel like it's a small ask.
In New Westminster, Ashley Burr, City News.
Now, BC has recorded another 641 new cases of COVID-19 over the last day. That pushes the province's rolling average above 600 per day, and that's for the first time in months. Even though no new deaths were reported in the past day, right now 138 people are in hospital and 78 of those are in the ICU. From August 9th to 22nd, unvaccinated people made up 83% of new infections and 85% of all hospitalizations. 83% of all eligible people aged 12 and up in BC have received their first dose, and 75% are fully vaccinated. A third dose of COVID vaccine is being offered to more than 500 people in the Revelstoke area. Why? Well, that's because one of their other shots came from a batch considered invalid after being incorrectly stored in a freezer. Interior Health is reporting some protection may have still been provided because none of the 516 people impacted have tested positive for the virus. Now, we've also been told changes have been made to make sure this won't happen again.
The 2021 school year will start off with much higher active COVID-19 numbers in Alberta compared to this time last year. Many school boards opting to keep masks and other precautions.
You know, we might have hoped that it could be more wide open right now, but the Delta variant has upset the apple cart on that.
But what do we know about the Delta variant and kids? That's one of the reasons Dr. Hinshaw announced the province was delaying the end of test, trace, and isolate until after the school year start.
In the U.S., unfortunately, hospitalizations in children have started to rise, most significantly in states with lower overall immunization rates.
Alberta Health Services confirming to City News, out of the 244 hospitalizations Tuesday morning, only one was a pediatric patient.
In the young age population, is that hospitalization and getting seriously ill is exceptionally rare.
That as children gather back in school, that I think it's inevitable that we're going to see a rise in cases related to schools.
Dr. Jim Kellner reminds that COVID symptoms in kids haven't changed with the Delta variant becoming the dominant strain. Fever, cough, headache, runny nose. But the research around Delta potentially having more severe outcomes is ongoing.
We know from information from Ontario that it seems that children with the Delta variant are about twice as likely to be admitted to hospital. So it may be that it's a thing that it could be causing more significant disease in some children.
For a parent, when they hear double the chance of hospitalization, that can sound really scary. But can you talk to me a little bit about how likely kids are to end up in hospital?
Sure. So kids are really unlikely to end up in hospital if they get COVID. And so in the Alberta context, about 1 in 200 children who gets COVID-19 may end up being admitted to hospital. And so that's a very small percentage.
Saying there is an exception. Babies less than a year old have a higher risk of hospitalization from COVID. Reminding as we head indoors for fall to keep hand washing, masking when in crowds, and to stay home when sick. And if you can, get vaccinated.
You know, the more people that are vaccinated, the less virus that they'll be circulating in the community, and the less likely that that virus can be transmitted to others who aren't vaccinated, and the less likely that new variants can form.
But says with any kid who's sick, to touch base with your family doctor if it seems out of the ordinary. In Edmonton, Carly Robinson, City News.
Justin Trudeau faces protests on the campaign trail as he promises to cool down Canada's overheated housing market.
The worst of another devastating wildfire season for our province may be over. BC Wildfire Service says crews are making excellent progress on some larger blazes thanks to cooler temperatures. And the number of fires that pose threats to public safety and property has dropped to 24 from more than 30 earlier this month. Now, there are still some areas that haven't seen significant rain. That includes the Caribou and South Okanagan, and the fire service is keeping a close watch. BC has had more than 1,500 wildfires since the start of the season, and there are still about 250 burning. An arrest has been made after a pair of people were randomly assaulted yesterday in Vancouver's Marpole neighborhood. Vancouver police say the suspect first came up to a 37-year-old man and punched him in the face. After that, he chased down a 65-year-old man, punched him in the head, and wrestled him to the ground. Bystanders stepped in to help the older man, and the suspect was arrested a short while later. Vancouver police say the suspect, a 36-year-old, has a violent past and is now facing new assault charges. The force says it's alarmed by the significant increase in seemingly unprovoked assaults throughout the city in recent weeks. Well, you may want to pack your patience for the next few months as repairs to the Cambie Street Bridge will begin tomorrow. The City of Vancouver says the repairs are part of a complete seismic retrofit and upgrade, along with some lighting improvements to the 35-year-old crossing. The main bridge deck work starts early next month and does require the city to close the sidewalk and cycle lane on one side. There will be walking and cycling access on the non-working side of the bridge. Work is slated to finish in December.
Liberal Party supporters in Hamilton, Ontario tried to drown out a protester making his displeasure known to party leader Justin Trudeau. Trudeau was in the middle of announcing how his party intends to tackle Canada's hot housing market.
We're putting forward an extremely ambitious plan that is going to continue to get people not just into homes, but help them buy those homes.
Trudeau promises to double the first-time home buyers tax credit, build, preserve, or repair 1.4 million homes, and add a 2-year wait period for foreign home buyers. And people looking to flip a home into a quick profit would be hit with a new tax unless that property's been held for at least a year. But the plans are being met with skepticism from the NDP, who say Trudeau had years to fix the problem.
What makes people believe all of a sudden he woke up today and decided, okay, you know, I've made the housing condition worse for 6 years, but now I'm going to somehow make it better? He had 6 years to deal with this. If he cared about it, wouldn't the housing crisis not be here? He had 6 years.
The New Dems focusing on long-term care on the 10th day of the campaign. Jagmeet Singh says private for-profit homes had a chance to prove themselves during the pandemic and blew it. Singh says it's time for another approach.
We are saying clearly that we would nationalize Revera. It is owned by it's owned right now by a federal agency. It's completely wholly owned by a federal agency, and we say clearly we need to get profit out of long-term care, starting with Revera, which is completely owned by the federal government. That is wrong. It should be public. It should not be for profit.
I support universal access in our system, public and free. And I also support provinces making sure that they can offer more choice, faster service, and less waits for their citizens.
Meanwhile, Aaron O'Toole reiterated his views on health care, saying he doesn't see it as the federal government's place to change a province's mind if they want to introduce private options alongside the public system. The Conservatives are riding high, with recent polls putting them neck and neck with the Liberals and making promises not usually made by Tories.
Canada's Conservatives will change the law so that when a company goes bankrupt or is being restructured, workers will be protected. We will prevent executives from paying themselves large bonuses while managing a company going through restructuring if the pension isn't properly funded. It's that simple.
In Ottawa, Xiaoli Li, City News.